Now, we're going long as hell here, so let's go ahead and wrap this bad boy up with our favorite indie games of all time. And once again, we'll just do five apiece, run through these rapid fire, get out of y'all's hair, let you get back to your day. I'm going to give a shout out to Rollerdrome off the bat here. This came out last year, if I'm not mistaken. It was a PlayStation Plus day one game, and I played the shit out of this thing. I thought this was so fun. It's essentially like rollerboarding. Tony Hawk meets Max Payne with some of the slowdown features, a Sable-esque art style. It just totally clicked for me, and I it's tough because it was published by Private Division, I believe. So it's like, what does indie really mean? I don't think that they were working with much more than a whatever 10, 15, 20 million dollar budget. So I guess that still categorizes as indie. I really don't know, but it's indie in some sense, and I definitely would it's an absolute must play in my opinion if you're into like the extreme sports games of yesteryear.
Awesome, man. Good choice. I haven't played it yet, but I know it's on the PS Plus still, and there's a trial. So haven't played it, but I keep hearing good things about it.
It's
And
damn good.
the double A and indie line is very blurred. So I think at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. It's all kind of in the same genre or same whatever.
Yeah.
My number five, and I should preface my indie list of all time changes weekly because there's so many indie games coming out, but at least at the time of writing this, number five is going to be a recent one called Shadows Over Loathing. So there was a previous game from developer Asymmetric called West of Loathing, and it looks like a Flash game from back in the day. It's a black and white, monochromatic stick figure game, which sounds unappealing to a lot of people. The humor is on point. It's a turn-based RPG. Shadows Over Loathing is basically, again, the same style. It's a turn-based RPG where you play the stick figures. It's one of the most hilarious games. I just finished it a few weeks ago with my wife, and we absolutely adored the humor. It was laugh out loud funny. You have quirky characters, you have tons of great worlds to explore, but it's turn-based battles, it's quests, it's picking up items, it's leveling up your character, but with this very comedic character structure and this very comedic narrative, and it will just make you laugh out loud. It's like 10 to 12 hours long, so it's pretty good length. But yeah, Shadows Over Loathing is a fantastic game with a lot of humor, and just easy to get through. So
Yeah, I'm definitely going to check this out. That is 100% up my alley. That looks incredible. So yeah, good shout out there. I'm for sure checking that out. I'm
cool.
gonna give a shout out to oh man, I'm gonna
Mhm.
give a shout out to Soma here for my number four spot. Once again, you talked about frictional games earlier. The team behind Amnesia. For me, this was just like in that realm of whatever walking sim stealth hiding from monsters, but just this existential storyline that they had going on, questioning what is human, what it means to be alive, like what even qualifies for that, like just all the psychological storytelling that was going on towards the back end of that game. Like it really stuck with me. It was one of those stories that after I finished I was like, damn man, like you start pondering existence. And yeah, Soma was really something special in that department. I'm gonna give it a shout out for my number four here. Not that we're necessarily ranking these, but yeah, definitely a huge shout out to Soma. And yeah.
Cool, man. I need to dive back into that. Pun intended. I've played it a few times but never finished it. So here we are, Soma. My number four is going to be going on the water aquatic theme of Soma, not a horror game though. Is called a game. The game is called Submerged Hidden Depths. I've never heard anybody talk about this game. It's a small indie game where essentially you explore this very small but open ocean area that's been there's a city there before, but it's all been ravaged by like this cataclysmic event. And you're a brother and sister who must explore this open ocean, again, a very small one. And it's all about exploration and adventuring. So there's no combat, but you explore kind of Uncharted style, clambering up buildings and all that. But it's all about finding out this relationship between your brother and sister. Your brother has this special power that has caused some damage, but now they're trying to repair it. It's very emotional, but the way you just kind of flow throughout the ocean and you can upgrade your ship, you explore these little disparate islands and buildings that have been, ravaged by the storms. And you basically are trying to bring the light back to the world. But the way it plays out, the way it just guides you from location to location, and just how beautiful it is. It's a phenomenal game. I know when I played and reviewed this game way back in the day, I probably gave it one of the highest scores I did on the channel because it was just that mesmerizing and relaxing, but captivating with the story. So Submerged Hidden Depths, it's the sequel to the original Submerged. It's a phenomenal and artistic indie game if you like a more slow paced one.
Nice. I'll have to check that out. I like you said, I've never heard of that before you shouted it out. So
Cool.
damn good shout out there. One I'm gonna keep on my radar.
Yes, sir.
So I'm gonna give a shout out here to Dredge. It came out this year, so it's hard to, like how do I feel about it in retrospect? That's something that you always got to kind of consider here. But man, the idea of Dredge, of just this fishing simulator meets horror game meets light role playing elements, like just the combination of all these things that sound like they would never go together somehow just blended for a perfect experience for me, man. I adored this game. Really went through and like got all the upgrades I could get. Just I would literally spend hours just dredging, just trying to find new gold rings to take to the pawn shop. And I really got addicted to that hook and getting the upgrades over the course of the game and being able to tackle more treacherous waters and fish for more specialized catches, if you will. And yeah, it totally worked for me. Loved some Dredge.
Awesome, man. It's a solid shout out. People seem to adore that game. So I'm glad you're shouting it out here.
Yeah,
We got a lot of water themed games these last ones, it seems like.
that is true. Yeah.
What are we on? Was that your number 3?
Yeah, I think so. I'm kind of just throwing these out, shouting these out.
All right. The next one I got is called the Adventure Pals. So again, these are mostly going to be ones you haven't heard of a lot, or just anybody in general probably hasn't heard of a lot. So I remember hearing about this game from the UK based PlayStation Access years and years ago. This is called the Adventure Pals. It's a cute, charming 2D platformer with some fantastic music. You have a derpy giraffe whose tongue spins around, and that's how you float around the skies. But it's just a really fun, charming 2D platformer, stage based. You have tons of upgrades and collectibles, and each enemy you defeat gives you experience points. It's not an RPG, but it kind of feeds into the whole loop of everything you do gives you back something. So you're always working towards something. It's just comedic. It's funny. It has great stage layouts. There's an overworld map. You can play in co-op. But the Adventure Pals is just a very fun, silly 2D platformer that deserves a lot more attention. Interestingly, the people that made that game are also the same people that made Cult of the Lamb. So if you like Cult of the Lamb, although it's a completely different game, their first game, or one of their first games, was the Adventure Pals. So yeah, there's that.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Cult of the Lamb. I really enjoyed that last year. I had a good time messing around with Cult of the Lamb. So that good shout out there. It's a team with a real pedigree. But
Indeed.
I'm gonna go into Norco here. I'm gonna shout out Norco. Played this for the first time last year through Game Pass, a point and click narrative adventure of sorts. And I just once again found the story here like truly incredible. I thought that the art style was strikingly unique but simplistic. This Louisiana-esque backdrop, tons of interesting characters that you're meeting along the way, getting to make some choices, kind of takes a twist into a mild spoilers here, but kind of takes a twist into a sci-fi direction that I found interesting. And the final like act of that game, it's so crazy seeing choices that you made and characters that you interacted with and maybe helped out, how they come back to help you in the kind of final moments of that game. Like it really was something truly unique. And I think it's still on Game Pass if I'm not mistaken. So go and check that out if you're a Game Pass subscriber.
Cool. I'm not familiar with that one, but if it has the choices, I know how much you love choice in games. So that must be a solid one then, Norco. All right, cool. So the next one I'm going to go with, you're going to see a theme of the games I talk about. I love platformers. It's my go-to genre. It's going to be A Hat in Time. Hat in Time's been out for a number of years now. It's just a charming as heck 3D platformer that harkens back to PS1 N64 days. You play as Hat Kid, whose spaceship gets like stranded, and you have to go find all these time pieces that have scattered across all these, random colorful worlds. One of the worlds is called Mafia Town. So it's a 3D platformer that's very, it has a lot of dark moments that you wouldn't expect, but it's fun. It's playful. You collect things, you do boss battles, and it's a 3D platformer. what else do you want from me? It's a fantastic one though, and has a lot of good writing and just good characters, and it's a fun one. So Hat in Time is my number 2.
Yeah, so I'm struggling here because I got a few that I let me give a couple shout outs real quick and I'll close off with what I do believe is my favorite indie game of all time.
Okay.
I'm going to give a quick shout out to, and some of these, like you said, AA indie. I really don't know the correct classification for some of these. I'm going to give a shout out to Maneater. I'm going to give a shout out to Remothered Broken Porcelain, and I'm going to give a shout out to, my bad, Tormented Fathers.
How dare you get Broken Porcelain? You monster.
Good catch there. Totally. Yeah. Tormented Fathers. Broken Porcelain was the indeed broken.
Although, side story, Remothered Broken Porcelain is the game that Brandon and I met. So
yep,
that broken game had us meet. So anyway,
that is because I commented on your review of it, and totally, you ripped it apart, and for damn good reason. It was a broken mess. But Tormented Fathers for me. So shout out to those. They're Little Nightmares. Shout out to that. Plague Tale Innocence. That's a tough one. I know that is technically indie, but it just looks so friggin', AAA, triple I, whatever you want to call it. I'm gonna go with like my GOAT indie game, the greatest of all time to me. My favorite is The Forgotten City. This was a very, very small team that initially just made this as a mod in Skyrim. And it is a time looping narrative adventure with every character in this world having a real like central through line to the main plot. The main plot is crazy. It's so bizarre. It goes in so many different directions, multiple different endings. It's all, there's a little bit of combat. You got like a bow and arrow that you can use, but how you even get the bow and arrow is so unique. Like every setup to each moment is so unique. Like it's not just, everything feels so intentional in this game. Like nothing feels procedural. Nothing feels like just generic content. Everything feels so handcrafted and purposeful. It's it's probably my favorite indie game of all time. Really, really unique with a good, it feels kind of, once again, triple A-ish. The character modeling is really good. The writing is really good. Just, I don't really have any complaints with it whatsoever. And it's not one of those time loop games that feels like a roguelite or anything. Like each time you loop back in time, you keep the information and the resources that you've obtained, or you at least keep the information. And it's like you kind of have a good idea of how to solve the mystery from each loop from one to the next. So yeah.
Love it, man. I've heard you sing this praises over and over again. So that's your number 1 of all time. All right, here we go.
Yeah, it's got to be it for me, man.
Love it, dude. I'll just do a couple of quick shout outs too, really fast. For horror game fans, Infliction Extended Cut. There's another game called Tinykin. It's a fun little indie game. I forgot the other one, so we'll just move into my number 1. My number 1 is going to be so controversial, but I don't care because it's my list, and it's the game I return to for indie goodness is Pumpkin Jack. Anyone that's been around the stuff I've done will be sick of me talking about this game. Pumpkin Jack is from a few years ago. It's not a fantastic game, I'll say that, but it's my personal favorite because it's basically like the old school Medieval game from PS1, but it's a 3D action adventure game that just perfectly nails the whole spooky, childlike Halloween vibe. It just does to a T. I'll also shout out Costume Quest, but Pumpkin Jack just gives you that perfect spooky but family friendly vibe of moving through different like spooky areas like forests and swamps and castles and graveyards, and you just jump around as Pumpkin Jack, who's a literally guy with a pumpkin on his head, and you collect items, you beat up baddies. The gameplay isn't really all that great, to be honest, but I return to that game constantly just because it reminds me of that time as a kid, of Halloween time, and you can tell so much love was poured into making this world feel like that Halloween vibe. So it may not be the perfect game ever made, because it's not, but it's my favorite indie game of all time for sure.
Yeah, I remember like watching you talk about this on your channel back in the day, and I always thought that the gameplay just looked, once again, one of my favorite things. It had a lot of variety. It seemed like a lot of diversity with the gameplay, like cart sections where you're on rails, and then just some hacking and slashing. Like the game looks really, really cool to me. So yeah, it's one that I'll have to check out at some point. But those are our favorite indie games of all time.